Hey, y'all. Head on over to Amandaland Exports. I just dropped a new drop. Support. Let's talk about emotional intelligence. Now, I want y'all to be really, really honest with yourselves. If a friend comes to you and says, oh, hold on, let me block this person. I really don't know who the fuck y'all be thinking you're talking to. So if a friend, so here's the notebook, the Views from Amandaland notebook. The bookmarks are coming in tomorrow, but here is the Views from Amandaland pin. And here is the Views from Amandaland Word of the Day logbook. It comes with words of resistance in the first page. And this gives you the opportunity to keep track of your words of the day. Views from Amandaland is my show that I created after I was fired from Radio 1 for being too polarizing and not consistently funny. And so I'm really proud of it because it is completely homegrown from the joy of learning and teaching. Every time I'm teaching y'all, I am learning. Learn as well. Is this for a teen boy? I don't see why not. And so the books have this circle so that you can number them, so that you can keep up. So this is the first, so you would put a 1 here so that when you fill this up, right? When you fill it up, then you can get the next one. And since the show is once a week, it's going to take you a while to fill it up. And then at the back, it has a doodle page. For all my doodlers. So, these are the stuff that I'm just creating. It's not super fancy. It's definitely not, it's quality, but that's just because I've been really fortunate to work with folks that really care about the work that they do. And I'm really thoughtful about trying to make stuff that people, that's not just for consumerism purposes, right? It has a use. It has a use. So also the sticker tabs are coming. They haven't come yet, but this comes with sticker tabs. And so the sticker tabs are going to be so that you can put tabs so that you can flip to the different sections. Because when we do the show Views from Amandaland, we have different sections of the show, right? So we have the critical thinking segment. We have the 60 seconds headline segment. We have level us up. And so I know if you're like me, you want to take notes. If you're like me, you want to be organized and taking your notes. So you're going to want to put the tab right here so that you can open to critical thinking. And then you can put your tab for the other section here, etc. So really just excited to never do shirts again because I hate sending shirts. Yes, it's spiral. So you guys like a spiral bound notebook? You prefer spiral? Interesting, because I wasn't sure how people feel about a spiral bound notebook. But I really want, this is where I want to go with my work. I want to make paper goods. I want to make notebooks and cards, and I want to make things that are tangible, that are outside of the digital space. Things that I still keep postcards and letters and greeting cards and all of my notebooks. I keep all of that stuff because I think I like touching it. I like the tactile, right? So y'all like spirals. That's really good news. That's really good news because my printer, who I really like, he was like, that's what we do. We do the spirals. And And just a side note before I get into the main conversation around emotional maturity, I had went to another printer around my way, and I asked them about putting like lined paper in the notebook, and they sent me a message and said, "We don't have lined paper just lying around." So what, so can you design some and send to us? And I just didn't like that tone. So I was like, you have to be patient. And for some of us, it's really hard to do that. We'll be like, thank you, Harvey. We'll be like, dang, this is the only option. No, I'm trying to tell y'all, if you can, explore other options, because the printer I found, listen, when I showed up today, he was like, I Googled you this weekend. I watched your comedy special. Funny stuff. And by the way, when I said to him, how would you put the lined notebooks, the lined paper in the notebooks? He was like, I would design lined paper. Okay, I'm taking notes. Nude paper, nude brown and color sheets. Okay. So let's talk about emotional maturity. Because I want you to be really honest with yourself. Just take a moment. And I want you to ask yourself, when a friend or a family member comes to you with a complaint about your behavior, or with an expression of how they felt in response to something you said to them, what is your first instinct? Be honest. What's your first instinct? I'm saying this because I love you for being honest, Lazuli Pearl, that 80s kidnap. Thank you all so much for being honest, because we're going to get through that. We're going to work through this right now. This is in the way. This is in the way. And of course, some people are repeat offenders. However, there is something very real about how we retain relationships and the ways in which we can show up better. Better is not the right word. The ways in which we can show up more holistically in order to retain our relationships. I can tell you that every relationship that I have had with a Black woman that has fallen off has been because when I shared with them, this thing that you said or this thing that you did affected me in this way, their response was to dismiss, to gaslight, or to accuse. And, you know, in the process of working through my last relationship with my ex, I had to do a lot of self-reflection on how I was showing up, right? And I realized, like, oh, I was doing that with him because my mom does that with me. However, I also then realized, oh, I am doing that with homegirls as well. And so then I said, I need to shift how I respond. I need to shift from defense to curiosity. Right? From defense to curiosity. And the benefit of this is that you can't lose. There's nothing that you lose in shifting from defense to curiosity. It doesn't mean that you have now it doesn't mean that you have now admitted to something that you didn't do. It doesn't mean that you have, quote unquote, taken accountability for something that you are being accused of. But what it does is, instead of closing doors, it opens them. So I'll give you an example. I had a friend who, okay, I'll give you an example. So when I moved back to New York, I have 3 friends who were here that I would have considered to be like my family, right? And those 3 friends, I had been here for 5 weeks, and my moving truck was finally arriving. So my stuff was finally coming. But I had been here for 5 weeks, like sleeping on the mattress, the air mattress, like all the things, going back and forth, trying to bring my cats, etc. And within those 5 weeks, none of them said, "Can I come help?" None of them said, "How are you doing?" None of them said, "When can I at least come visit you?" And this really hurt my feelings. Now, what I will say is, there is a lot of expectation, more than I personally believe should be expected. There's a lot of expectation for people to deliver their hurt in a palatable way that somehow determines how you respond to their hurt. And I would say that if you come from a place of curiosity, for the most part, I don't think it really should matter unless they're trying to hurt you, which is its own thing, but that's not what we're talking about here. So I sent them a text, all 3 of them, separate texts, but they were all the same texts. And I said, I will use the Angela Rye situation in this as an example after this, since I know y'all want to hear why I call her and Tiffany D. Cross mean girls. And I have no shame about telling my version of that story. So I said, "Hey, y'all," I said, "Hey," and this is to the 3 friends. "Hey, I've been here for 6 weeks. You haven't asked how I'm doing. You haven't asked if I need help, and you haven't asked when you can come see me. Is this how it's going to be now that I'm back in New York?" So the first friend replied back and said, "I'm sorry that you're feeling alone. I just haven't had, time," or whatever. To which I replied, "But you have time for a man." Now, I want to remind you all, I am 44, so the people in my life are of a certain age. The next friend said, "Help? Question mark, question mark, question mark. I thought you paid somebody to help you. I work 2 jobs. And I don't have time to help you." And then she went on to say, that I was being self-centered. And for the record, her 2 jobs are, one of them is remote and one of them is traveling. So, but this let me know, like, oh, none of them are white. These are all Black people. And she was like, "I did check on you. But their responses were in no way acknowledging of the reality of the situation. My third friend Brandon Victor Dixon, hit me and said, I won't front, like I felt a way when I first read this text. But then I realized you were sending this text because you felt unsupported. So when can I come visit and how can I help? This is a really good example of he needed a pause because his initial response was defense, which is fair. However, then there was examination, right? And I think what happens so often is that we simply are unwilling to do the examination for fear. I've been in situations where I've had someone say to me, like, I didn't appreciate X, Y, Z. And I did the self-examination. I'm like, damn, I see you. And it's either that wasn't my intention. However, I apologize for it landing that way. Or it's, I had a blind spot there. I missed the mark. I missed the mark. I apologize. So now I'm coming back to it. And I think that we don't do enough of the curiosity as compassion practice. We allow ourselves to make these decisions about how we allow ourselves to let our emotions that are attached to trauma make a decision about how we interact with people that we claim to love. So, have those friends been helpful in the past? Yes. But that was 10 years ago, before I lived here. And I think that because I gained a certain level of monetary success, they felt that I no longer needed their support. You know who did come help me? Adrienne Bailon. Adrienne Bailon came over and helped me put some candles away. So shout out to my good buddy Aid. The reason I consider Angela Rye and Tiffany D. Cross mean girls is because my feelings have never been considered by them in response to their actions, even though I have expressed it to them. And I consider anyone who behaves that way with people that they know to be mean girls. I think it's really just important to show people value by having curiosity and compassion around their feelings and how you have treated them. And there's a particular way that atonement shows up that is not passive. Atonement is assertive. It is, assertive is not the word. Atonement is purposeful. Atonement is direct. It's not something that that someone has to figure out. Intentional. It is humble. Like that's the part that so many of us always have to work on is the humble part, right? Because it's like you still want to not be seen as the bad person. And the truth of the matter is that just because you may have not shown up in your best self doesn't mean you were a bad person. It can be reflective of a bad moment. and you can completely shift the energy of that. You can balance that karma out. I was a member of a group chat that had both of them in it. And then I realized that I was no longer in the group chat after they went on a trip. And I was like, oh, I guess I accidentally left the group chat, only to learn that I had been removed from the group chat because apparently I was not engaging enough. And for what it's worth, if someone is not engaging enough, I feel like there's a fair respect to simply reach out to them on the side and ask, are you okay? And I think it's really necessary for us in protecting our friendships, protecting our relationships, in giving them the worthiness that they deserve. We have to extend ourselves sometimes in ways that are uncomfortable. However, it's just the thing that you do, right? So if I am removed from a group chat with women that I revere and no one felt compelled to say to me, hey, do you still want to be in this group chat because it looks like you're not conversing? I look at that as funny style. Now, I had taken myself out of the group chat months before because at the time I was pregnant and I was not clear-headed and there was a lot of talk about politics that was like frustrating me. And so I removed myself from the group chat. However, I was later added back by Tiffany. So, it was quite a shock to me to hear, oh, I removed you because you weren't interacting and the space is a personal space. And I respect that. I respect that. I also know that when you have regard for somebody, you also understand how they would respond to that, right? Like removing somebody from a space without their knowledge is simply mean. It's mean. And it says that you are discarding them. It says that you do not value them. And when they address, hey, that was shitty, and your response is, I'm sorry you feel that way, something to that effect, but please let us know if you need any support, that's disingenuous. So then when I see Tiffany a couple months later and it comes up and I say, that that really was not cool. And the response is, wow, you still seem bothered by it. Amanda, we're all very busy and we simply just don't have the time. And you're right, removing myself may have looked like that for them as well. However, that was clarified later. And the difference is always in communication. That's the difference. Because you have every right to communicate if you feel like someone was sideways. When you do not do that, you are leaving many things open for assumption and for trauma-based responses. And so communication helps to allow us, communication allows us to not dip into those spaces. Like, y'all know what it's like. If someone said they're going to text you and they don't text you, you start filling in the blanks. But you fill in the blanks with your own bullshit. So, hi, Mama. You want to come up? So, I think it's also sometimes people simply not wanting to acknowledge the ways in which they are harming folks. And I am not quiet about the way I've been harmed. So no one is in mystery. No one is confused about if I was sad, if I was bothered, if I had my feelings hurt. Nobody. So there's no excuse. And this is what so many of us do in our friend circles. We don't tell people how we feel. We carry resentment. We don't tell people how we feel. And and then we retaliate. Hey, E. We don't tell people how we feel. And we project. All of us are guilty. We do it all the time. We do it all the time. And it is, it is not emotionally mature. So at a certain point, we have to then say, okay, well, this isn't a result. Like, I can't blame lack of maturity now. I mean, I can't blame youth anymore. This is just lack of maturity. So, who am I blocking? Oh, this person who somehow seems to know about my life in a way that I love it. I love it. I think what's interesting is that sometimes people will try to align how I interact with strangers on an internet with how I interact with actual real people. It's not the same. I don't even know who's a bot, who not, who's an op, who not. Hi, mama. So a lot of times when I see that type of response, that's someone saying, you do that to us and we don't do that. You know, it's like someone here just said, we are real people, Amanda. How do you know that? That's not actually factual. There are bots everywhere. But here's the other part of it. I reserve the right to call people mean girls that I feel are mean girls. And the truth of the matter is, there just is not the same outrage for when I am called all type of shit. There is no curiosity. There is no, effort to get to the bottom of it. It becomes simply just, we're running with this. And I see that. I've lived in this body and the trend is exponential. There is no investigative curiosity. And it doesn't matter, how much if we want to stay in defense mode, in our real friendships as well as in our digital spaces, we're just not going to get anywhere. That's why on such a regular basis, I have to be like, let me not let me not be defensive about this. Let me be proactive. Let me be exploratory about it. Right? Let me be investigative. Let me be curious. And for me, that's been a very helpful way to move through the world, because it's also allowed me to identify relationships that are better suited for me. I need to be in relationships and closeness with people who see my feelings as valuable and who are not afraid to address them head on. Right? And so that requires people who are doing that work for themselves. Like, I can't be in a relationship with a man on a romantic level or, friends on any level, who can't who don't hold space for vulnerability. I had a conversation the other day. I had a friend here, and she was talking, but she just kept talking kind of like to herself, even though I was here. And eventually I said, you're talking, but you're not talking to me. And she was like, well, what do you mean? Like, I'll just be quiet. I'm talking too much. And I was like, no, it's not that you're talking too much. However, it's just that you're not talking to me. Like, I feel like you're kind of like ranting and I'm present, but I want to be engaged. And in that context, in that moment, it could have been, well, she could have taken that all the way to the left. But she was like, and immediately shifted. And we had such a more fruitful time together because we were in conversation. This is what I try to do. I don't want to compare this, but like, I don't like when I watch interviews where I'm like watching the person wait for the person to stop talking to then just respond. Like, let's be in exchange. I want to listen to what you have to say. Right? And I thought that was a really dope moment. Because it was really honestly very encouraging for me, because I feel like I get misinterpreted so often when I bring to somebody like, hey, this thing that you said did not sit well with me. I said that to somebody the other day. I said, at one point in time, you talked about this person and it did not sit well with me how you addressed me. And I accommodated you in the moment, just in order to diffuse things, but it still resonates with me. And they were very offended by me saying that. Because the thing about it is that we have been trained to feel like we are not allowed, or we've been trained to feel like if you simply share with somebody that they have bothered your regulation, that you're like scolding them. when that's not always the case. I mean, scolding comes off a certain way. Scolding is a very different thing. But when you say, this resonates with me, that's why they have that therapy language. I don't know, Malika Hustle. I don't know what your deal is, but you're getting blocked. It's not the delivery. To be quite honest, I think at this point, folks just receive shit in whatever voice they hear. But one of the things that a lot of us will not admit is that we have been raised in a narcissist country. The culture of the United States is narcissistic. This is a nation that has taught us through years of indoctrination since we were children that it is impervious to critique, that it is the best, and outweighing and outmeasuring anything and anywhere else, that anything or anyone challenging this country is doing so because they want to harm it. So we have grown up in this environment, and there's no way of really avoiding that unless you have folks around you who are actively doing like counter mindfulness, and or you yourself are counter mindfulness, are practicing counter mindfulness. And yes, Cass Dillon, narcissists are revered and exalted. However, there's also just narcissism. Sometimes you just have a narcissistic response. Sometimes you're not necessarily a narcissist, but you have narcissism. You have ways in which your narcissism exists. So, that is something to be present with. And I think there's a narcissistic response that many of us default to when we are addressed directly about our behavior. And that narcissistic response is to protect our feelings. So the shift in that becomes, this isn't about my feelings. This is about their feelings. And in this moment, they're expressing their feelings. And I can hold space for that. So, there's work we got to do. So Eric, what's Eric's last name? Hold on. So Eric Morrison Smith was in the chat earlier, and he is the founder and the head of the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. And when he was on Views from Amandaland, he talked about how in doing coalition work with all these different organizations, one of the things that ends up being an impediment is the fact that there's so much trauma in the space that, people can't get past the trauma to get to the work. So before we can even get to the coalition building, we have to get through the trauma. And so that is what I am trying to just throw out to consider for you guys tonight. Because it is 1000% a time of extremism. The gaslighting is at an all-time high. And the lack of empathy is deeply disturbing. So we have to combat these efforts, these practices, internally, molecularly, on a cellular level. Do you understand what I'm saying? That requires attention that only you can pay to yourself. It requires rigor and intention that only you can apply. So I encourage you to challenge yourself to lead with curiosity versus defense in any situation with people that you value. Now, I ain't gonna lie to you. Sometimes it's like, man, go fuck yourself. I ain't gonna lie to you. But, like I started teaching an art class to kids. And, children are extremely open a lot of times, unless they've suffered very severe trauma. They are very open and willing to kind of just be their full selves. So it was like 10 kids. I had them all give me a high five. And then this one kid was like, I'm not giving you a high five. I said, oh, why not? Because I don't feel like it. So, all right, well, think about it. We'll come back around to it. So later in the class, I said, well, first of all, these fifth graders was talking about NATO and Korea and all type of things. And then I heard them talking about, well, what if England tries to take revenge? And I said, why would England try to take revenge? And one of them said, well, because, we beat them in the Revolutionary War. And so then the other young lady who was not giving me my high five, she said, well, also there's the War of 1812. I said, so what was the War of 1812? And she said, a war that happened in 1812. And I said, don't get smart with me. I let you slide the first time, but there's not going to be another time. What is the War of 1812? And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and she said, the War of 1812 was a war. Like, let's not get gassed. Okay. I let you live. And so then the counselor after was like, I was going to check her. But then I saw you had it handled. So I said, you know what? I said, Oh, man. And then I asked them, because they were talking about taking over the world. And I asked them, so what happens when you take over the world? And they said, you own the world. And I said, well, what happens when you own the world? You own all the land. I said, so what happens when you own all the land? Well, then you can, like, determine how people live. And I said, okay. So what's the plan? In terms of, like, how they would live. And one of them said, well, I wouldn't make anyone my slave. Got it. Cool. That's good. And so I let them sit with that. And then I said to them, well, here's a question for you. What was the world before it was owned? Whose was the world before there were countries? And High Five said it was natives. And I said, would you like to know a word that is a more positive word for that? She said, yes. And I said, indigenous. And she went, indigenous. And then the counselor across the room went, indigenous. The exercise that I did with the children today is reflective of essentially what I'm talking to you guys about. And what in that it was an exercise around being in community. They each had a piece of paper. They had all these art supplies, and they could do whatever they want with the art supplies. And then I would say, switch! And they had to find another, then they had to go to another piece of paper. And, sorry, someone just asked me a question on here. And so then they had to go to someone else's and add to that. And then they did it one more time. So by the end of the class, all of the artwork had been touched by each of them. And when they looked at the artwork, they were able to see, oh, I did that in that one. Oh, I did that in that one. Oh, I did that in that one. And it was really cool to see them be able to see themselves in all these different spaces. And I said to them, this is what community is. You're showing up differently in these different spaces, but it's all the same space. Hold on, let me block this jackass. So next week, we're going to do something around nature. I got all these different little mini animals. And then I asked them to think about, like, what is their, like, favorite parts of nature. And so they're going to be combining the animals and their favorite parts of nature, whether they match or not. It might be a tiger in the ocean. It might be a Tyrannosaurus Rex in daisies. But I want them to, be thinking about nature. I don't know what High Five gonna do. I don't know. Oh, that's what's up, Nola. So I will leave you all with, again, this exercise around interacting with each other. To be quite honest, Nadia, I think I am maternal, but I don't have the energy capacity to be a parent. Like, I feel like I would have suffered autism burnout like every other day if I were a parent. To be quite honest. I actually had a psychic tell me, she was like, do you want kids? And I was like, no. And she was like, oh, good. And I was like, why? And she was like, because the way your chart is set up, kids would fuck you up mentally. Congratulations, Nadia! She was like, the way your thing is laid out, like, it would really mess you up. So, but I'm here I'm here as auntie, though. I got a couple little nieces and nephews floating around here. Okay. But I was never designed to be a parent because I'm for the world. And not being the parent of a child has allowed me a certain level of freedom and carelessness that is needed to stand the way I do. So the word of the day is curiosity. Emotional maturity is not about, in my opinion, emotional maturity is not about it's not necessarily about the books you've read, but it's about being willing to read yourself. As for Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl, I can't feel conflicted about that. Bad Bunny is a major, huge star. Like, why wouldn't he do the Super Bowl? Now, I'll tell you this. There better not be one word of English in that show. And I better be able to smell the rice and beans through the goddamn screen. Okay? Not somebody on here using porno terms. I had to take it down, Wendigard, because people were like, oh, you're not speaking real Spanish. But I will tell you. I'm about to listen to Baila Inolvidable right now. Jamming. Debí tirar más fotos que cuando que tú Scanafa da da nana, scanafa na nana, scanafa. Scanama na mama na mama na mama. Nueva York! It is definitely time to go to bed. I know Spanish. I just don't know the words to Bad Bunny songs. But I know a good amount of Spanish. Anyways, again, curiosity. will say this. One of the things that was most helpful for me that I continue to have to implement is seeing myself as a being, seeing myself as an energy space, an energy field that exists in a world of other energy fields and energy spaces. And in looking at myself kind of like if you look at like a Venn diagram, sometimes you and someone else's energy space are going to have to overlap. Doesn't mean that boundary isn't still there, but it overlaps. And in that overlap is where you are able to find out what the dealio is without giving your whole self over to it. You're just giving this much. You're just giving this much to the conversation, to the space, to the situation. And if we're not willing to give that much, we're not going to get anything. We're not going to get anything from each other, and we're not going to get anywhere. So, particularly around people that you claim to revere, particularly around people that you claim to love, to protect, there needs to be a shared willingness to do that. And I've said this before, one of the easiest ways to find that out is to share with somebody vulnerability. And how they respond to that vulnerability gives you a great indication on whether or not it's a great indication on how far your Venn diagrams can overlap. Good night. Make sure to go support my work at amandalandexports.com. Make sure to watch Views from Amandaland on Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern. Tomorrow morning, I'll be doing 2 Instagram lives with members on the Freedom Flotilla, on the Global Summit Flotilla. They are approaching Gaza tomorrow. They are expecting to be boarded and incarcerated at around, I guess it would be, they're 7 hours ahead. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 12, 11, 10 a.m. So at roughly 11 a.m. Eastern time. So tonight I would like for you to lift them up. If in whatever exchange that you do with the energy space, pray, meditate, jumping jacks, whatever. And, do the same with the people of Gaza, of Sudan, of the Congo, of Chicago, of Portland, of everywhere. Okay?